The forest was silent except for the distant hum of insects and the soft rustle of leaves swaying in the morning breeze. Ethan Ward opened his eyes slowly, his vision blurry as if a heavy fog covered the world around him. For a moment he could not remember where he was. The last thing he recalled was setting up camp near the northern ridge of a newly surveyed planet. His job as a junior field researcher was simple: map the terrain, collect samples, and send data back to the colonization team orbiting above. Nothing in his orders suggested danger. The planet had been marked low risk, with no recorded signs of advanced life. But as his sight cleared, he realized something was terribly strange. He was not lying inside his tent, nor on the portable bedding he had carried with him. Instead, his body rested directly on cold moss. A chill spread across his back as moisture soaked through his shirt. He blinked hard and lifted his head only to feel a sharp pain in his temple. A shallow cut throbbed just above his eyebrow. He tried to remember. Had he fallen or had something dragged him here? His heart began to pound. It was then he saw her. At first he thought his eyes were still tricking him. A figure leaned above him, blocking part of the sky where two pale suns hung low. The figure was slender, graceful, and unlike anything he had ever seen in his years of training. Her face held human softness but also something animal-like, with fine russet fur that caught the dawn light. A pair of pointed ears rose from her head, twitching slightly at the faintest sound. Her eyes glowed amber, not artificial like a lens but alive, deep, and curious. And behind her swayed a long plumed tail with bands of white near the tip. Ethan froze. His breath caught in his throat. She was no hallucination, she was real. An alien woman, fox-like yet distinctly intelligent, studying him with cautious interest. Her hand, covered in fine fur, hovered near his forehead where the cut was. For a moment he thought she meant to harm him, but instead her fingers brushed lightly against the wound. Her touch was gentle, almost careful, as though she wanted to check if he was in pain. His voice trembled when he finally spoke. Who are you?" The sound of his words broke the fragile stillness. Her ears twitched sharply. Her eyes widened in alarm, and in a single smooth motion she drew back. For one heartbeat, Ethan thought she might answer, but then her body stiffened. Her tail lashed once and she bolted. She moved faster than he thought possible. With a leap, she disappeared into the thick undergrowth. Branches swayed violently, and a blur of golden fur slipped between the shadows. Then she was gone, swallowed by the forest, leaving behind only the fading echo of her movement. Ethan lay there stunned. His rational mind fought to explain what he had seen. His training told him no sentient life had been detected on this world. His equipment had scanned for heat signatures, life signs, and none suggested anything beyond small fauna. Yet he had just looked into intelligent eyes filled with awareness, thought, and something else. Fear. He forced himself to sit up despite the throbbing pain in his head. The moss clung to his clothes as he brushed it away. His first instinct was to doubt his senses, but the memory of her touch, warm and real, silenced his doubts. He checked his wrist console. The system clock showed he had been unconscious for nearly 2 hours. How had that happened? He glanced at the moss where he had lain. There were faint impressions of smaller footprints near him. Not boots, not shoes, but paw-like with toes elongated like fingers. Proof. He had not imagined it. Ethan felt a mixture of fear and wonder. If she was real, then the entire classification of this planet was wrong. That could change everything. Colonization fleets were already preparing to move down. If an intelligent species lived here, humans could not just claim the land as empty. He stood, shaky but determined. His training drilled into him one rule above all: observe, record, verify. He activated a small beacon and left it blinking near the moss bed. Then he began to follow the broken trail left behind. The forest grew thicker as he advanced. Towering trees twisted into arches above him, their roots forming natural bridges. Pale vines draped like curtains, releasing faint spores that glowed in the dim light. The air smelled sharp, a mix of pine and metal. Ethan kept his scanner active, but interference lines crackled across the screen, as though something here resisted being measured. His mind replayed the sight of her. The curve of her tail, the alert tilt of her ears, the way her amber eyes had widened when he spoke. She had not attacked. She had studied him with curiosity first, only fleeing when he broke the silence. That meant she had the capacity for thought and decision. That meant she was intelligent. The more he thought about it, the more his pulse raced. He was the first human to see her, perhaps the first in history to witness her people. The stories whispered among explorers about forest spirits or fox guardians on strange worlds suddenly seemed less like myths. But a new fear crawled into his chest. If Colonization Command discovered her existence, they might not treat her people as equals. History had shown too many times how the strong forced themselves upon the unknown. Ethan clenched his fists. He could not let that happen. He followed the trail until the forest opened into a small clearing. There he saw more signs. Woven strands of leaves tied into patterns across branches, small stones arranged in deliberate circles, and faint claw marks etched in spirals on a tree trunk. These were not random. They were symbols, perhaps even language. Ethan crouched to study them. His fingers brushed one of the stones and he felt warmth, as if energy lingered within. Whoever made these marks lived here. Whoever she was, she had a people, a culture, a hidden world beneath the canopy. A sudden rustle above made him look up. His breath caught. She was there again. Perched high on a thick branch, the foxwoman crouched with her tail wrapped around her legs. Her amber eyes locked onto him. This time she did not flee at once. She watched. Ethan slowly raised his hands, palms open to show he carried no weapon. "I don't want to hurt you," he said softly, knowing she might not understand the words but hoping the tone carried meaning. For a long moment they stayed like that. Human below, alien above, the forest holding its breath. Then, to his astonishment, she tilted her head and spoke. The sound was a series of soft tones, almost like a song, rising and falling like wind across hollow reeds. He could not understand, but he knew it was speech. Before he could respond, the ground trembled. A faint vibration shook through the soil, growing stronger. From behind the trees came a faint mechanical hum. Ethan recognized it instantly, a drone. One of his own team's automatic survey drones, programmed to sweep for unknown movement and report threats. The foxwoman's ears shot up. Her body tensed. In an instant she leapt down with astonishing grace, landing lightly before him. Ethan barely had time to react before she gripped his wrist firmly and yanked him off the trail. He stumbled with her into the thick brush just as the drone floated overhead, its sensors scanning the path he had stood upon seconds before. They crouched together, hidden by leaves. Ethan could feel the warmth of her furred arm pressed against him, could hear her breath quick and steady. The drone passed above, its red light sweeping. After a tense pause, it drifted away, vanishing into the distance. She released him quickly and stepped back. Her eyes studied him once more, unreadable. Then she pressed something into his palm. A small stone, glowing faintly with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Ethan looked down at it, stunned. When he raised his eyes again, she was gone. The branches swayed as she slipped once more into the forest, vanishing like mist. Ethan stood alone in the clearing, the glowing stone warm against his skin. His mind raced with questions, but one truth burned brighter than all others. He had not dreamed. She was real, and the forest held secrets far beyond anything his people had expected. And now, with the stone in his hand, he knew this was only the beginning. The morning sun rose higher, spilling golden light through the thick canopy of alien trees. Ethan Ward sat by the edge of his small camp, staring at the glowing stone resting in his hand. Its faint pulse of light had not dimmed since the foxwoman placed it there. It was warm, alive almost, as though it carried the memory of her touch. He turned it over again and again, unable to look away. Nothing in his training prepared him for this. He was supposed to map the terrain, catalog plants, and report safe landing zones for the colonists waiting in orbit. Yet the stone in his hand was proof of something far greater. An intelligent species lived here, hidden in the forests, unseen by human scanners. His heart pounded as the weight of this truth pressed on him. The foxwoman had not harmed him. Instead, she had saved him from his own people's drone. That single act told him more than 1,000 sensor readings ever could. She was not a threat. She was a guardian, perhaps even a protector. But why? What did she see in him? Ethan shook himself from the thought. He had to be careful. His team would be suspicious if he returned with strange readings or delayed reports. If they discovered her people too soon, they might treat them as obstacles. Colonization was rarely gentle. He clenched the stone tighter. He could not allow her world to be crushed before he even understood it. Taking a deep breath, Ethan packed light gear, leaving behind his camp beacon to mask his absence. He adjusted his scanner, though he already knew it would flicker with interference as it had before. Then he stepped into the forest, following the faint tracks and markings he had seen earlier, into the deeper woods. The forest grew denser as he moved away from familiar paths. Towering roots arched like giant bridges, vines draped overhead and strange fungi glowed faintly in the shadows. The air was rich with scents he could not name, sharp, earthy, and sweet all at once. Every few steps he paused to listen. The forest was alive with whispers, rustling leaves, distant calls of unseen animals, the hum of energy deep underground. But it was the signs of intelligence that made his heart race. A twisted branch bent into a loop, stones arranged in a spiral, strips of bark peeled in deliberate patterns. These were not natural accidents. They were symbols left like breadcrumbs by someone who wanted to be remembered. Ethan reached one of the larger trees and noticed marks carved into its trunk. The lines curved like flowing water, interwoven with small circles. He traced them with his fingers, feeling their depth. Could it be language or ritual? He had no way of knowing, but one truth was clear. This was culture. These people did not live as wanderers alone. They recorded, they shaped, they created. A sudden rustle made him look up. His pulse quickened. For a moment he thought it was her again. His eyes searched the branches, but all he saw was a blur of leaves swaying. Still, he felt watched. He had the sense of being followed not by machines but by eyes that studied him silently. He pressed forward. The meeting on the branchet was near midday when Ethan reached a clearing. Shafts of sunlight pierced through the canopy, scattering across the ground. In the center stood a stone formation, a ring of upright slabs, each etched with symbols like those on the tree. Moss covered their bases, but their arrangement was too precise to be random. As he stepped closer, a soft sound echoed above. His head snapped upward. She was there. The foxwoman perched on a branch high above him, her tail curled around her legs. Her amber eyes glowed faintly in the sunlight as she watched him. Unlike their first meeting, she did not flee at once. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He raised his hand slowly, palms open, showing he carried no weapon. "I'm not your enemy," he whispered, though he knew she might not understand his words. His tone, his open stance, that had to carry his meaning. She tilted her head, her ears twitching. Then, to his astonishment, she spoke. Her voice was soft, melodic, carrying notes that rose and fell like music. It was not random. It was language. Ethan could not understand, but he knew in his bones that she was communicating. "I don't understand you," he admitted quietly. He pointed to himself. "Ethan!" Then he pressed a hand to his chest again. "Ethan." Her eyes narrowed slightly. She did not mimic the sound, but she gave a short tone almost like a hum. Then she placed a hand lightly on her chest, fur catching the light, and uttered a name. Strange, flowing, difficult for his tongue. To his ears it sounded like Lyra. His breath caught. She had given him her name. He repeated it softly. Lyra. Her ears twitched again, and this time she did not look away. For a moment something passed between them. Fragile, tentative, but real. A bridge. The warning of the drone. The moment broke when the earth trembled faintly under their feet. A low hum filled the air, mechanical and steady. Ethan stiffened at once. He recognized it, another drone. Lyra's ears shot upright. Her body tensed like a coiled spring. She leapt down from the branch, landing with grace, and without hesitation she grasped his arm. Her strength startled him again. She pulled him toward the underbrush, her tail streaming behind her like fire. Ethan stumbled but followed. They crouched together behind a wall of thick leaves as the drone passed overhead, its red sensor sweeping back and forth. The machine hovered, scanning, its lens glinting. Ethan knew its programming. Any sign of unknown life would be flagged and reported. His breath quickened. If the drone detected Lyra, if command received that data, everything would spiral out of control. The colonists would come prepared to subdue, not to talk. The red light swept dangerously close. Lyra pressed against him, pulling him lower. Ethan could hear her breath, steady despite the danger. Her eyes remained locked on the drone, sharp and unafraid. Finally, after what felt like endless minutes, the machine drifted away. The hum faded into the distance. Lyra released him, stepping back. Her amber eyes studied him once more, unreadable. Then, without a word, she reached to the small pouch at her side and pulled out another stone. It glowed faintly like the one she had already given him. She pressed it into his palm, curling his fingers around it. The warmth pulsed, steady and alive. Ethan's voice shook. "Why me?" he whispered, though he knew she would not understand. But she only looked at him for a moment longer. Then, just as before, she turned and vanished into the trees, her golden fur blending with the shadows until she was gone. The vision of the stone back at his camp, Ethan placed the two glowing stones side by side. Their light pulsed in rhythm, then slowly merged, casting a soft halo across the tent walls. To his astonishment, the stones projected faint holographic shapes into the air. Figures appeared, tall, fox-like beings like Lyra, standing among vast trees. They carried tools, wove patterns, raised children. Their tails swayed in unison during what looked like rituals beneath starlight. He saw glimpses of structures hidden high in the canopy, platforms connected by bridges of vines and light. Their civilization was real, thriving, and beautiful. Ethan's throat tightened. The colonists above knew nothing of this. To them, the forest was empty, ready for clearing. But here was proof that it was alive with history, with a people who had chosen to stay hidden. He touched the stones and the vision flickered. For a moment he saw Lyra herself, standing at the edge of one of the canopy bridges, looking outward as if waiting for him. His decision hardened in that instant. He could not remain silent, but he also could not reveal her people to the command. Not yet. If humanity came unprepared, they would destroy what they did not understand. He had to protect this secret until trust could be built. Ethan leaned back, his mind racing. He had crossed a line he could not return from. He had met her, spoken with her, received her name and her trust. He now carried the weight of two worlds, humanity's hunger to expand, and the quiet strength of a hidden people who wanted only to live. As night fell and the forest glowed faintly with bioluminescent life, Ethan sat alone with the stones in his hands. He whispered her name once more, Lyra, and felt the forest itself listening. He knew now that his mission was no longer about mapping or reporting. It was about discovery, yes, but also about choice. The next step he took would decide not only his fate but the future of two species. The night was quiet, but Ethan Ward could not sleep. His tent glowed faintly with the pulsing light of the two stones resting beside him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. Amber eyes, sharp yet gentle, filled his thoughts. Lyra. The name she had given him echoed like a promise in his mind. Above him in orbit, the colonization fleet waited. Within days, their orders would begin, forests cleared, settlements built, resources harvested. To them, this world was only land and material. But Ethan now knew the truth. It was not empty. It was alive with a people who had chosen to remain hidden. If the fleet landed, they would tear through sacred groves and crush centuries of quiet culture beneath steel. He clenched his fists around the stones. Lyra had trusted him enough to give him this gift. She had even saved his life twice. He could not betray that trust. At dawn, Ethan packed light gear again and stepped into the forest. This time he did not follow at random. He called her name softly as he walked, repeating it like a chant. Lyra! Lyra! His voice echoed faintly between the trunks carried by the morning breeze. The forest seemed to respond. Birds scattered in bursts of color. Spores floated through beams of sunlight. The air shimmered faintly, almost alive. Ethan pressed deeper until he reached the ring of stone slabs again. He stood there and spoke louder. Please, I need to see you. I want to understand. For a long time, nothing happened. He thought perhaps she would not come, that he had pushed too far, but then movement stirred above. His heart leapt as she emerged from the branches, her golden fur catching the light. Lyra landed softly before him, her tail swaying low. She studied him in silence. Ethan raised his hands in peace. I know you. Don't understand my words, he said quietly. But I can't let them take your world. You saved me. I want to help you. He held out the stones. They pulsed together, casting a faint glow across both of their faces. Lyra's eyes softened slightly, though her body remained tense. She stepped closer, her ears flicking as if she weighed his tone more than his words. Then she placed her hand lightly over his, pressing the stones back toward his chest. The message was clear. These were not just objects. They were responsibility. The hidden village. Without warning, she gestured for him to follow. Ethan's heart raced as she slipped into the deeper forest. He hurried after her, ducking under roots and weaving between towering trunks. The path was confusing, full of twists and detours, but she moved with ease. At last, the trees opened into a breathtaking sight. High above the ground, bridges of woven vines and wood stretched between platforms nestled among the branches. Small lanterns of glowing crystal hung like stars, lighting the canopy village. Figures moved gracefully across the bridges, others like her, foxfolk with tails of varying colors, their eyes glowing faintly in the twilight. Ethan gasped. He had not dared to imagine such a place. The hidden civilization he had glimpsed in the stones was real, alive and thriving above the forest floor. The villagers noticed him immediately. Some froze in alarm. Others growled softly, their fur bristling. Ethan felt fear prickle his skin. He was an intruder. But Lyra raised her hand, signaling calm. She spoke in her melodic tongue, her voice carrying authority. Slowly, the tension eased. The villagers backed away, still cautious but no longer hostile. One elder, his fur streaked with silver, stepped forward and studied Ethan with piercing eyes. Ethan bowed his head slightly, hoping respect would cross language. The elder gave a slow nod, then gestured for him to remain. Lyra motioned for him to sit by a firelit circle. As night settled, the foxfolk gathered. They sang in low, haunting tones that echoed through the canopy. The sound blended with the rustle of leaves and the hum of unseen energy. Ethan listened in awe. It was not just song. It was history, memory, and warning woven into sound. Though he could not understand the words, he felt their meaning deep in his chest. This was a people bound to the forest. Their lives, their strength, their stories grew with the trees themselves. The vision of truth. When the song ended, Lyra stepped forward. She held one of the glowing stones and pressed it gently against Ethan's forehead. Light flared, surrounding him. Suddenly he was no longer in the village. His mind swam with visions. He saw great forests spreading across the world, untouched by human hands. He saw generations of foxfolk tending shrines, weaving bridges, raising children under twin suns. Then the visions darkened. He saw fires, machines tearing through roots, drones burning groves. He saw his own people's ships descending, steel crushing sacred places. The foxfolk fled into shadows, their voices silenced, their lanterns dimmed. The vision ended. Ethan staggered, breathless. Lyra's hand steadied him. Her amber eyes held sorrow but also determination. She wanted him to understand. He nodded, his throat tight. "I understand," he whispered. "I'll stop them. I swear it." The decision at dawn, Ethan returned to his camp. His wrist console blinked with urgent messages. Command wanted updates. They were impatient. The fleet above was preparing to land. He sat with the console in his lap, torn between duty and conscience. If he told the truth, they would come armed, treating the foxfolk as obstacles. If he lied, he risked his career, even exile. But if he stayed silent, Lyra's people would fall before they had a chance to be heard. He remembered her saving him. He remembered the village, the songs, the visions of destruction. His decision formed like iron. He activated the console and began to type his report. His fingers shook, but his voice stayed firm. Environmental hazard detected. Unstable energy signatures in the northern forests. Recommend delay of landing until further analysis. He added false data, interference readings, fabricated warnings. He sent the report with encryption codes, making it look official. It would buy time. Not forever, but enough. When he finished, he leaned back with a heavy sigh. For the first time since arriving, he felt the weight of betrayal. He had chosen to stand against his own people for the sake of another. But deep inside, he knew it was right. The new beginning, That evening, Ethan returned to the forest. Lyra was waiting near the clearing of stone slabs, her tail low but her eyes watching him closely. He held out his console to her, showing the message he had sent. She did not understand the words, but she seemed to sense the importance. "I bought us time," he said softly. "They won't come. Not yet." Lyra tilted her head, studying him. Then slowly she extended her hand. Ethan hesitated, then placed his hand in hers. Her fur was soft, her grip firm. For a moment, they simply stood together in the forest, human and alien bound by fragile trust. Above them, the stars shimmered through the canopy. The future remained uncertain. The fleet still waited, and one day the truth would come out. But tonight, Ethan was not alone. He had chosen his side, and in that choice, two species had taken their first step toward a new path. Not conquest, but alliance. The forest whispered around them, as if blessing the beginning of something greater.